Hi, it's Miss Miller, and today we're going to continue our discussion on To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee, and we're going to look closely at the Mockingbird connection. Many of you have probably wondered why is the title of the text To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Especially if you've read the text from front to back, you probably have recognized that the mockingbird itself is probably mentioned maybe 2 to 3 times throughout the entire text. But the significance of it is super important and explains everything to us, especially in our understanding as we navigate our way through the reading. So this is a cursory look at both Boo Radley and Tom Robinson. Now, before we do that, you should know the symbolic meaning of the birds, the Bluejays versus the Mockingbirds, and why the Mockingbirds, right? It wasn't to kill a Bluejay, it was to kill a Mockingbird. So basically you should know that the Yules and perhaps even DeBows would maybe signify like a Bluejay. And we know, you see the Bluejays here, the illustration of them sort of having some sort of conflict. Bluejays are typically in the bird world more dominant birds. They're the more dominant ones. And they're also known to be very obnoxious, territorial. They're like bullies, right? So the Bluejays are like bullies, which kind of explains why Atticus says, hey, you can hit a Bluejay, but never hit a Mockingbird, right? And even Miss Maudie echoes those same sentiments. Bluejays reflect the racist characters in the novel, and even Atticus doesn't care for them. And by the same token, we look at Boo Radley and Tom Robinson, who sort of signify and embody the traits and characteristics of an actual mockingbird. And mockingbirds are innocent. All they do is sing, they make beautiful music, they make beautiful music, and they don't hurt anybody. They are innocent. They're vulnerable, and that is also, or those would also include the vulnerable and the innocent people in the text. We see that our impressions of Boo Radley changes. It evolves over time, and we begin to see him as also vulnerable and innocent, and he wouldn't hurt anyone, right? And the same can be said for Tom Robinson, innocent and vulnerable. So that would be the significance of the bluebird the Bluejays versus the mockingbird, right? And why it's so significant in terms of the title. So the literary span of To Kill a Mockingbird is over the course of 3 summers, told from the point of view of Scout. And the first summer, we know that they are obsessed with Boo Radley. Her Dill and her brother Jem, or Jeremy, are obsessed with Boo Radley. They fear him. They see him as monstrous, as awful. All the imagery used to describe him gives the tone a sense of fear. And then the second summer, we see, even with the tire, the rolling, maybe a sense of evolution in terms of how Scout feels, because now, even though they're fearful, they're having fun with it. It sparks their imagination. I mean, they're even going to land right in front of the Radley home, which still is elicits a certain amount of fear in the characters, but they still are so curious and willing to confront it. And by the third summer, they redirect their attention because of what's happening in Macomb County from Boo Radley to Tom Robinson, because it takes up so much of the rest of the text. And it's so interesting that we first see Boo Radley, and then we're introduced as readers to Tom Robinson. And again, these are the innocent and vulnerable, and we see it through the eyes of Scout throughout the text. The unassuming men in To Kill a Mockingbird, these are 2 central figures that inform Scout about herself and her community. We learn through the life of Boo Radley. Scout learns about the dark side of Macomb County and society in general, and how they're quick to judge, and what happens when you have a recluse, and when you're ostracized from society, and fear, and what all that embodies. And then we learn, spoiler alert, we learn through Tom Robinson, we learn through his death. Scout experiences the effects of racism, exclusion, insults, and social rejection. So these characters, though, haven't necessarily been the focus of our reading, are central figures to sort of to help Scout with her learning and understanding of where she is, and also the time period. The significance of Boo: he's a source of adventure. He teaches about judgment. He scares and stimulates their imagination. Boo also is fascinated with the kids. He gives them gum, pennies, medals, soap, dolls, broken knife, watch, and a blanket. He even saves Scout's life at the end. So we recognize a lot about Boo Radley. He truly is the Mockingbird of the text, and you shouldn't kill him, or you shouldn't ostracize him, or we shouldn't demonize him. And then we have T. Robinson. Again, he reveals intolerance like Mockingbirds because of his vulnerability, is subjected to injustice in Macomb County. So it's just, we learn so much about justice and judgment through these two central figures in the text. And then Super A, Atticus to the rescue. Tim Robinson's dog is infected with rabies, and we know that. And so it's Atticus who comes in and sort of saves the day. He shoots this dog infected with rabies, and then he comes in for Macomb County, and that's affected with or infected with racism, and he takes on that. Super A to the rescue, right? And then we see a lot is said by what Scout says in the text, and we feel a sense of hopelessness in the courtroom. And she goes on to say that Scout says the trial was like watching Atticus walk into the street, raise a rifle to his shoulder and pull the trigger, but watching all the time knowing that the gun was empty. That's terrible, right? That's an awful feeling to have. And most of the people in the courtroom, a lot of them, at least on the second floor, feel the same way. They share those same sentiments. And that clearly explains why Atticus, knowing at the very beginning that he's going to take on this case, knowing already, right, because he was confronted by his daughter Scout, are you going to win? He says, no, we're not going to win, but we have to do this. Every man has to take on this burden at some time in their career as a lawyer or an attorney, so I've got to do this, and I wouldn't be able to look at you or say the same things that I say to you if I didn't do this. So it was more out of dignity and out of pride and doing an integrity. And so even there's another part in the text where they say, when before the mob mentality happens and the whole idea of Tom Robinson being moved to a different jail, that justice is going to be served in some way, in some form. The truth is going to be heard, even though there's not going to be justice in this case. So it's really sad to feel so helpless throughout the text. And then we have, the helplessness that we all feel in circumstances like that. So this is To Kill a Mockingbird, a connection, a cursory look at both Boo Radley and Tom Robinson.